Okay. All right, let's just start. I've been trying to, okay. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. This is Victoria Nalule, and today we're hosting a webinar, which is also part of the African Energy Transitions book launch. And this one is a special webinar focused on gender, technology, and the future work in the energy and extractive sector. It will be delivered by Alaka Lugonzo and Chege, both authors and book contributors to our African Energy Transition book. So without wasting any time, I would like Ms. Alaka and Mr. Chege to briefly introduce themselves, and then afterwards, Kenneth will give us the introduction with respect to the key issues in gender and extractives, and Alaka will bring in the issue of technology and how it is likely to affect the global efforts to ensure gender equality in the extractive sector. So Kenneth, would you like to introduce yourself?
All right, thank you very much, Victoria. I'd like to start by thanking you so much for the opportunity, and then also for allowing me to participate in this book project. So my name is Chege. I'm a PhD law student specializing in oil and gas law at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. I'm also a researcher at the Mineral Law in Africa Research Chair at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. And I'm a practitioner at the ENS law firm, also in Cape Town, South Africa.
All right, thank you very much for the introduction. Ms. Alaka, would you like to please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much, Vicky. My name is Alaka Lugonzo. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya with a specialization in energy and extractives law. And happy to participate in this webinar, and also very grateful for Dr. Nalule for giving us an opportunity to contribute to this book and the body of knowledge. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for the introduction. Now we want to start off with our discussion, because I must note, I think we have only one chapter on gender and extractives in the book. And this is a very important chapter because with respect to energy transitions, you can't leave out the role of women. So I would like to start with you, Kenneth. Could you please give us a brief overview of gender and extractives, highlighting the key things you talk about in your chapter, and then afterwards, Alaka will come in with her contribution also.
Okay, thank you very much. So with this chapter, we start by acknowledging that the world is changing, and it's mostly through the integration of technology into every aspect of life, which changes the way that we work, the way that we operate, and the way that we live. So the digital revolution, which is also it's called the fourth industrial revolution, is inevitable. That is what we acknowledge in the chapter. And it's changing the way that we live, conduct businesses. The fourth industrial revolution has very big implications on almost every aspect of daily life, affecting how we interact with technology and transforming where and how work is done. And therefore, all changes of all sectors in the economy, including the extractives, must adapt to these changes. For example, looking at the current COVID-19 pandemic, it has sort of speeded up the implementation of the fourth industrial revolution because it shows the importance of digital readiness to allow for businesses to continue running. For example, in South Africa, when the lockdown was started at the end of March 2020, the Minerals Council of South Africa tried to lobby the government to allow the mining sectors to continue operating in order to avoid severe losses. Already, the mining industry and the different stakeholders have already lost billions of rand because mining has not been allowed to continue. So this is something that we address in the chapter. And then also, so these changes that have been brought about by the fourth industrial revolution will have an effect on women, specifically in the extractive industries, which is an industry that already has an insufficient amount of women. According to the World Bank, it says that about 5 to 10%, there are only about 5 to 10% of women in the extractive industries globally, employees. And this is a problem that we hope to address in the chapter. Also, if we look at the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which was supposed to be implemented by the 1st of July, there's a growing realization that this agreement will not be successful without the involvement of women in the different sectors of the economy, including the extractive industry. In Africa, generally, women contribute. Women are about half of the population of Africa, and they contribute significantly to the key sectors of the economy. For example, in agriculture, which is a key driver of many economies in Africa, women contribute a significant amount, especially in terms of labor and the workforce. This is also something that we address in the chapter. So the changes that will come about through the fourth industrial revolution will have an effect on women, specifically in the extractive industry. And this is also another key point that we bring about in the chapter. The influence of technology and the fourth industrial revolution on the energy and extractive sector is the focus of this chapter, particularly the position of women amid the fourth industrial revolution. In the context of mining, we've already seen many companies that are already embracing digitalization. And for example, this Canada's Gold Spot Discoveries Corporation, which is one of the major companies in the world, is already embracing artificial intelligence in terms of exploration by reducing capital risks, and then also it sort of increases efficiency in mining operations. Also, the Rio Tinto company, which is one of the biggest mining and metals companies in the world, has also adopted autonomous vehicles and trains in terms of transporting minerals from the mines. So we argue that the digital technologies could be leveraged to achieve socioeconomic growth and development specifically for women. For example, it provides avenues to upskill women to address the gender disparity gap that is rampant in the extractive industries. For that. Women are historically excluded from participating effectively in the economy in the different sectors, for example, through legislation and gender restrictions and superstitions from traditional cultural practices that have designated gender roles that emphasize the perception of women's maternal functions, and they relegate women's roles to domestic household duties. And this creates the disparity that is attributed to the lack of requisite skills to engage properly with these new technologies. There's a perception that the extractive industry is a male-dominated field, which has caused a lot of women not to really engage in terms of education and training in these different areas of the sectors of the economy. And for Africa, the key challenge for Africa that we address in this chapter is how to leverage and optimize and diffuse its significant gains that were made during the third industrial revolution. Africa has the youngest population, and many of the people in Africa are born into the digital age already. So therefore, parts of the continent are home to vast technology hubs and startups driven by the youth. But the problem is how we can leverage this to promote development in this fourth industrial revolution. And despite the prevalence of tech platforms and the capacity to bring about technology or the potential, other factors are very crucial. For example, increasing institutional structures, appropriate skills, competitive trade and investment incentives, and sustainable demand. These are also the focus of the chapter. Lastly, we also speak about how the women, we basically speak about the benefits that including women into the extractives is going to have on the economy. In terms of promoting the labor force field, and then also it creates more efficiency. And according to statistics, gender equality improves performance. It improves company to community relations, especially when women are involved in the senior decision-making roles. And it brings about economic empowerment for women and communities. And lastly, according to statistics also, women invest 90% of their income to households, while men only contribute about 30 to 40% of the incomes to the households. Therefore, not including women has very severe effects, not only in the households, but in the economy generally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kennedy, for that brief overview. So we shall go straight to Alaka to also bring in her contribution, specifically with respect to how technology is likely to affect the global efforts to ensure gender equality in the energy sector and also in the extractive industries. Alaka, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Vicky. Thank you very much, Kennedy, for accepting to write this chapter with me. And I'd just like to say my inspiration for writing this chapter is because I've been in a position whereby I've worked directly with women along the value chain. So be it oil and gas and be it mining, I've been able to interact with women who work in oil and gas companies, women who work in mining companies, women who work along the extractive value chain, be it women who are doing business or any work along the value chain. Now, I'd like to say this. Today, I learned a new word, and from a tweet actually I saw. So the tweet says, the sector is actually not male dominated, it's male populated. So it's up to us for as women and as gender enthusiasts to be able to see or to find a way in which the women can be able to find their voices and find their spaces. So my contribution to this chapter was the sector outlook and also the proposed solutions on what we can be able to do in order to advance the issues around technology and gender. So it's important to mention that based on the numerous research that has been done, we have to acknowledge that this research is rides on the backbone of very many other studies that have been done and acknowledged. And I acknowledge those studies because they have brought us, they brought people who are actually interested in the sector, have given us some light on the direction in which the sector should be moving to. Also, I'd like to say that in January, during the World Economic Forum, they produced a report. It's called the Gender Global Report. If you please have a look at it. The report says that none of us will see gender parity in our lifetimes, and not likely will many of our children. I think after reading that report, it was a bit scary in terms of writing this chapter, because it means that we are busy fighting, or should I say fighting, advocating for equality or for parity, yet at the end of the day, we might not be able to see it. But we, Kennedy and myself, decided that as we write this chapter, we could be able to at least shed some light on the few things that have been done in the past and things that are going to be influential in the future. I'd like also to say, pre-COVID-19, I mean, companies were looking to automate, companies were looking to get into the digital space, but it was still in conversations, and people would go for seminars and they talk about it and they happen in breakaway sessions. But now it looks like this is going to be the norm, that whereby we're actually sitting here in a digital platform having a dialogue on a chapter that we wrote. And Victoria, I'm sure she had anticipated that she'll launch this book in a big conference and everybody will meet. But at the end of the day, we've ended up here in a Zoom, in a Zoom meeting, actually disseminating this chapter. So it means we have been forced to actually fast pace our efforts to digitalize. And therefore, for us, I think the chapter, yes, we had thought about writing the chapter before Corona, but mid-Corona, I think everything just, we were forced to actually put pen to paper faster. So looking at the sector outlook, anybody who works in the sector understands the numbers. I'll just reiterate a bit on the numbers. Like for the mining sector, I think women work in mainly artisanal and small scale mining, and there are women who work in the large scale mining. And there needs to be a clear distinction between this, because artisanal mining is largely informal, low tech, labor intensive, and labor intensive operations. But large scale, most of the women work in human resource and in management positions. And the direct participation of women in the sector is between 10 to 20%. But that notwithstanding, there are countries like South Africa in 2008, they put together a mineral charter, and they encouraged mineral mining companies to employ women. And if you look at their numbers right now, they're up to about 20% in participation of women along the value chain. And if you read through the charter, they were saying that the reason why women don't take up these jobs is because of the bravery index. The bravery index means if jobs are sent out, a woman would rather apply for a job when she meets all the qualifications. But a man, if he meets 2 qualifications, he'll literally apply for that job. Therefore, you find that in the pool of applications, they have no choice but maybe to pick a man because there were no women who applied for that job. And then career advancement policies are lackluster, formal training on specialized skills, because we understand that the energy and extractive sector is highly technical. Even for us who are lawyers, we have been forced to actually learn the technical terms, to actually understand what exactly happens upstream, midstream, downstream along the value chain. Therefore, it's highly technical. And if you're not interested to get the training, then you might not be in a position to even apply for the job or even apply for the promotion. Also, issues on safety and have also come up, because women feel like they need to work in an environment whereby they're safe, or they need to work in an environment where they can be able to, say, for example, change, or washing rooms. Say, for example, you're on a rig and they're not proper washrooms, or they're not proper changing areas. Those are some of the issues that come up in some of this research that have been undertaken. So for ASM, again, that was for large scale. For ASM, at least ASM, we can talk about the 30%. But I want to state this because according to INGAF in 2018, they mentioned that, yes, they could be 30%, the contribution, women account for 30%, but they are in supporting and subservient roles, meaning they're the ones doing the washing, they're the ones doing the panning, then transporting, the cleaning. But when it comes to high income activities like women going after getting a license, women drilling, women doing value addition, the numbers are really low. And for the oil and gas sector, the narrative is similar. Companies are just unable to attract, retain, and promote the women along the value chain. And the diversity decreases even as the numbers go high. As women go, as the senior positions, you find there's only 1% of women sitting in boards. But that notwithstanding, those statistics are out there. And even as we did our research, we discovered that because the future is here, when we were doing this research in the middle of Corona, and that means that this future, which we were saying in the chapter, the future is 10 years to come, because we had anticipated that around, if you read the research material, you'll see changes need to happen in the year 2030. It's not possible for that to happen in the year 2030, following the fact that for the last 3 or so months, we've been in the house working from home and finding ways in which to be productive from the house. So it means these changes can't have to happen right now. So the future, how the future of extractives is going to look like is because companies are after efficiency, effectiveness, and safety. It means that they have to sit down and consider the faster turnaround times. How will faster turnaround times look like? But even in all this, amidst all this, where are the women in the space? Where are the women in the space? Considering they already are lagging behind in terms of numbers, even before Corona. You can imagine now after coronavirus and the introduction of the fourth industrial revolution, where are the women going to be? So we proposed a couple of solutions in the chapter, and we called it jobs gained and jobs lost. So the transition is going to be painful, but it has to happen. And because we know technology will come and replace the jobs, what are we going to do as women to be able to either reskill or become technically savvy to be able to work in the sector? So they say by 2030, which I don't think is realistic, about 40 to 60 million women will need to transition into the tech space globally. At this point, I think that number, that people have already started transitioning. We've started teaching ourselves how to use technology. And since this chapter is, maybe Kennedy did not mention that the chapter is focused on artificial intelligence. Therefore, we've looked at artificial intelligence and a bit of machine learning as ways in which companies can adopt exploration. Such technology definitely allows for efficiency. It definitely allows for faster turnaround times. If you're having machines running 24/7, 365, then it means you'll need either people to a lean team to run those machines, and means that some people will lose their jobs, but also some people will also get opportunities to actually run those machines. So therefore, we said it's important for the industry to adopt to the changing times. And industry stakeholders such as the government, private sector, NGOs will have to all come together and think of ways in which we will quickly adopt and will quickly change and transition into the fourth industrial revolution. Therefore, the role of government in the chapter, we stated that government would have to invest in reskilling and training. That would mean that it would have to invest in the education sector, whereby people will get opportunities to actually go back to school, to learn new skills, to learn to be technologically savvy and understand how they can be absorbed into the oil and gas sector. Reskilling will allow women to take up apprenticeship, some of these training courses, some of these apprenticeship courses, because as we all know, the energy and extractive sector is 80% technical and 20% non-technical. Therefore, if rig engineers, geologists will definitely have to reskill, because if you're going to do exploration using machine or artificial intelligence, that would mean somebody needs to understand the algorithms or the figures or whatever needs to be done in terms of exploration. In Kenya, for example, we have the Canadian government. They've invested in a program called the Kenya Education for Employment Program, which is working with TVETs and technical universities to give people the opportunities to go back to school and to learn some of these apprenticeship courses. And I'm hoping that post-COVID-19, they will now start thinking about proper digitization, machine learning, 3D computing, so that people can actually learn these skills. Also, government will have to subsidize some of these courses, because if in the event that we are going into a fully digitalized or technical world, it means that not only for the extractive sector, even for other sectors, we may have to go back to school, may have to go back and do short courses or do training courses. I remember when we started learning about computers and people were being told how to learn Word and Excel, and were like, this thing looks really out of this world. But at some point in time, it became the norm. The phones came out, and people quickly adapted to phones. People quickly adapted to things like WhatsApp, Skype, and things like those. So it means with time, governments will have to involve themselves directly so they can be able to subsidize some of these programs. Secondly, I'd like to talk about a very interesting program in Singapore called Skills Future. Singapore have invested, it's a national program, and they've invested in this whereby they allow for people to actually train for the fourth industrial revolution. So Singapore has actually seen the future, and their target is women. So you log on, you log on to the platform, the digital learning platform, and you pick the course you want to learn. And most of those courses are geared towards artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the numbers. If you look at the numbers, a lot of women are getting onto the platform, because their courses are targeted towards women, and it's free of charge for the people of Singapore. So I think that would be a good pilot for other countries, especially African countries, which are emerging economies, to actually pick up some of these examples and run with them in terms of how people can be able to reskill. So private sector is important because it normally supplements the efforts of government. So inclusive, for them, it is important that they provide inclusive and diverse workspaces, because they are the people who, they are the employers, they're the people who are going to absorb these people coming out of the schools, coming out of this training and apprenticeship courses. So it is important that they also play an important role in this sector. Private sector should also be championing digital learning platforms. I think some of us know the platform called EDX. I don't know how to pronounce that. It's an online learning platform whereby you can go online and you can learn any course that you need to learn. It's important that for the extractive sector, private sector, say international oil and gas companies, international mining companies, energy companies, partner with governments to have tailor-made courses that are geared towards technology and the fourth industrial revolution. And once people finish their courses, at least the companies will be able to absorb them back so that they can be able to advance their skills and technology and also advance their staff. Skills and technological transfer. I think this is important when governments are negotiating contracts with IOCs or mining companies, because part of their local content parameters should include trainings to their staff or the attaches to learn about artificial intelligence in part of their local content and training manuals. Also, I think it's important for private sector to agitate or to partner with governments to invest in internet and mobile infrastructure. I think that is right now, without a doubt, everybody has a phone. It's easy access to have a phone. It's easy access. And some of these people, like in India, for example, they have a very interesting course. They've partnered with the Indian government and Google have partnered, and they're giving courses to Indians to learn about technology and advancing their careers. Also, I think it's important to state that NGOs also and development partners also play a key role in this sector. Normally, they're the people who agitate for change. They're the people who lobby for some of these rules and regulations to go through. It's important for development partners to come on board. I'd like to also mention that some people like the IFC have been doing some good work on these areas because they develop things like toolkits whereby governments can be able to look at these toolkits and incorporate them in some of their courses or incorporate them in the education sector. Also, IGF also have a lot of some good training manuals in which people can be able to incorporate in their training sector. It's important to mention this. The world is changing, and we cannot agree to leave the women behind. And we have already seen that the women, at the end of the day, as in gender parity, the gap, it just keeps increasing. But we are moving into a technological phase. And a lot of times, women shy away from change because a lot of times women would not apply for some of these jobs, women will not take up some of these courses. But in the chapter, we really agitate that if the champions of this would definitely be government, private sector, and NGOs. And we hope that once the book is out, you'll be able to get it and you can be able to use it in reference to do a bit more research on this. Thank you, Vicky.
All right, thank you very much, Alaka. So I'd like to take in questions from our viewers. Anyone with a question, I'll be able to promote you and so that we can see your video and you can be able to ask the question. Anyone with a question? All right, as they think about their questions, let me see. Okay, yeah, we have no questions so far. I would like to engage you, Kenneth, on the issue of how can men be supportive in this gender equality? Because we have, like we know, we're moving towards digitalization, and also we're seeing like it's mostly the men who are well equipped with technology, who know how to use the technology, the softwares. So where is the space of women in all this, and how can men be supportive in respect to ensuring gender equality in the extractive sector? And then as I think about answering that question, my question to Alaka would be on the issue of transitioning to a low carbon economy. Because we see a lot of literature, it's focusing on gender equality in the extractive sector, including oil, gas, and mining. But is there a role for women with this move to transition to a low carbon economy? Because with the low carbon economy, we are also seeing lots of technological advancement. So is it likely that women will be left out? And is it likely that the gender gap will increase with a transition to a low carbon economy? And as you're answering that, I'll be able to promote some of our viewers. I see someone asking a question. I'll just promote him so that he can ask. Kenneth, I give you.
Okay, all right, thank you for that question on how men can be involved. It is a fact, and we have mentioned that the extractive industry are predominantly dominated by men, especially in senior positions. So one way that men could be involved in promoting women in terms of the extractive industry is by allowing a lot more women to be involved in decision making. This is mostly in the senior positions of the mining companies, and we've already seen many of the mining companies or the companies in the extractive industry are increasingly making public commitments. They're increasingly making public commitments to integrating gender equality, and also the inclusion of women's economic empowerment and everything in that regard. Also, we've seen a lot of international organizations like the EITI, the Extractives Industries Transparency Initiative, which is a global body. It has, so the EITI and its stakeholders have also committed to intensify the efforts to promote more women in terms of senior positions. They've made efforts towards gender equality and diversity in in the natural resource governance space. As I mentioned, mostly in the senior positions. Also, as Alaka has mentioned, many of the policy makers in terms of governments can also bring about policies to force the mining or to provide an incentive for the mining companies to allow more women or to train and upskill more women in terms of joining this senior positions and become more involved in the mining industry.
Alaka, please go on to answer, and then afterwards, I've seen Abdisalam. I've granted you access so you can ask and engage the panelists. And Angela, I'm also going to grant you access to speak. So Alaka, please address that, and then we shall hear from Abdisalam.
Okay, to answer your question on the low carbon economy, yes, the transitioning into a low carbon economy is it is necessary. It is going to be slow. It is going to be painful. But I think I'll speak for emerging economies and also for the mature economies. I think for emerging economies, it's important that we custom make some of these policies for gender mainstreaming, because at the end of the day, it's not a one size fits all kind of shoe. Say, for example, in Kenya, countries are still, the country in Kenya today, we have a mix. Okay, the good thing about Kenya is that we have an energy mix. We have, of course, we have our hydro, we have our solar, and we have some of these things. But in some of this, in the process of transitioning, people, policymakers have to be educated in terms of what is good and what is necessary in terms of gender mainstreaming. A lot of blanket policies are normally formed at the top without addressing issues around public participation and things that are happening on the ground, because essentially low carbon economies are, for a country like Kenya, we cannot even be seen to be a mature or a frontier nation. So we are still grappling with our issues around firewood. We're still grappling with our issues around solar. We're still grappling with our issues around hydro. And then now you introduce low carbon, and people are not educated. Therefore, it's important that our policymakers actually sit down and actually understand what exactly low carbon transition means, and then therefore tailor make policies that will enable the transition to happen smoothly.
All right, thank you very much, Alaka, for that. Yes. Abdisalam, would you want to engage the panelists via video? I can see I've granted you. And then I also see Angela has raised some good questions. So as Abdisalam is preparing, Angela, do you want to speak via video? All right, so Angela is asking how or what is being done to implement the gender equality solutions in smaller countries such as Sierra Leone, where the inequalities have become an accepted norm. So that's the question from Angela. And then Abdisalam is asking, can we say that our employment laws are rigid in not protecting the women in the sector? So those are the two questions which you can address from our viewers.
Okay.
Okay, I can, sorry.
Okay.
I can do the employment.
Okay.
So from a legal, because from a legal standpoint, and as an advocate, I'm working in Kenya. Yes, the employment laws are rigid, and I'll talk about them in terms of the extractive sector. Gender mainstreaming is it's work that needs to happen continuously. As saying, as a woman working in the sector and working in a frontier nation, like say for example Kenya, one we've recently discovered oil, and also our laws, say for example our mining law, our energy law, our oil and gas law are pretty new laws. So we're still grappling with how to figure out our sector. And then in comes the issue of employment, in comes the issue of gender. So following the Employment Act, which is of 2017, it is not gender skewed. It's not skewed, towards gender. Therefore, they have been the country and different sectors have been trying to advocate for gender, sector by sector. And for the oil and gas and mining sector, I think the Mining Act is very gender forward. I must commend the drafters of that act. But the Oil and Gas Act and the Energy Act is not very gender inclusive. Therefore, I think we need to go back to the drawing board, and then this is where the NGO world and the development partners come in, whereby they throw a lens and they throw the spanner in the works and say, look, if the Mining Act is looking at the sector in a gender lens, how is it that the Oil and Gas and the Energy Act do not look at it through an energy lens? And now bring in the Employment Act, which covers, generally the issues that are happening around Kenya. I can tell you that act is not gender friendly at all. But this is where the development world comes in. But we can say that efforts are being put towards addressing some of these things. So I'll say there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of, let me speak for Kenya, we still have a long, long way to go in terms of also engendering the Employment Act.
All right, thank you. So Kenneth, could you address the issue with respect to Sierra Leone?
Yes, if I can also add to the previous point, a lot of laws historically have prevented women from participating in the extractive industry. For example, if we look at the International Labour Organization Convention of 1935, it specifically precluded women from participating, especially in underground mining. And therefore, you could argue that some of these policies have been transmitted to the society today, whereby there's that perception, like I mentioned, that women should not be involved in these sectors, and that this could be a factor why many of the laws currently do not provide for that. And then the second question was on the smaller countries. So what is being done? I know, like in Guinea, they're starting to formally recognize small-scale mining, which is also called artisanal mining. For example, in Guinea, there are actually more women that are involved in the small-scale mining as compared to men, and they start to formalize this. Many other African countries are also doing the same. Even in South Africa, at the present time, artisanal mining is still considered illegal, but there are so many people there, basically thousands of people that participate in this sector, including women. But then in recent years, the ministry has also said that they will start to formalize this. So this is also one of the measures that is being taken in that regard. And hopefully in the next few years, we'll see many more African countries being involved in terms of formalizing the artisanal and small-scale mining sectors.
All right, thank you very much, Kennedy. So we shall take our last question from John. John, do you want to speak on video? I've granted you access. All right, so I'll just read out the question. John is asking, do you think African leaders have failed to implement the raised policies to create the job in the market? So this will be our last question, and I would like you, Kenneth, to say a few words about that, 2 minutes, and then you give your closing remarks. And then I would also like you, Alaka, to say something about African leaders with respect to gender equality implementation. 2 minutes, and then you say your closing remarks, and then that will be the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Okay, to answer John's question, an argument could be had generally that many laws in Africa exist on paper, but the implementation is the problem. So therefore, I do think, although many countries do lack such laws that promote women in the industry, but then the ones that do have those laws are not really properly implemented. And which is something that also the civil society can be involved in terms of lobbying for the implementation of such laws. I don't know whether that answers your question, but then also there's been a lot of commitments, like I made earlier, with the international society through the extractive industry transparency initiative and other initiatives to promote more women. And companies are already putting that into place by realizing that women need to be involved more in the industries and providing more opportunities for them to be involved, especially in the senior decision-making situations and positions.
All right, so Alaka, just 2 minutes and then we do the closing remarks.
Okay, thank you very much, Vicky. Yes, it's important to mention that, just to reiterate what Kennedy has said, the will is there. It's just that there's so much work to be done that maybe some of the efforts are not clearly coming out, and maybe it'll take a bit of time to come out. I also want to mention that since I've been working in the sector, I want to acknowledge, yes, I think the international community is doing a very good job with it. Say, for example, the African Union, they have developed something called AWIMA, which is the African Women in Mining Association. It brings together mining associations all over the African continent. Those are quite a number of mining associations that are coming together to advocate for women and for gender in the sector. So that notwithstanding is that the will and the goodwill is actually there to do it. It's just that there's a lot of work on the ground that needs to be done. And my closing remarks is diversity in the energy and the oil and gas and mining sector. It cannot be overstated. This is something that we need to keep talking about. We need to keep talking, arguing for it, advocating for it, and pushing in order for women to be able to get their spaces in the sector, because they are qualified and they actually do a good job in the sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. I also see some remarks from Drover, who is saying that the labor laws that allow women, they have to be, in summary, women have to be qualified with respect. They should get the necessary education, necessary trainings in order to be involved in the mining sector. Thank you very much for that remark. Kenneth, I think you forgot to give your closing remarks. If you can do that, then we shall end the webinar.
Okay. My closing remarks, just also to echo what Alaka has said. It is inevitable that women need to be involved in all sectors of the economy, not just the extractives, but mostly the key sectors like the extractives. The challenge for Africa now is how we are going to leverage the fact that we have the youngest population in the entire world, in Africa. And now with the advent of the fourth industrial revolution, we're in a better position to leverage this new technologies like artificial intelligence and others to promote more growth and development for African countries. And women must be involved in this case, considering the fact that they constitute about half of the population of Africa. We cannot leave them behind.
All right, thank you very much. And then I see someone wants to engage Alaka, but we have to go because we're running out of time. Alaka, have you seen a comment from Angela? Question, actually.
Yes.
Okay, you can just address it 1 minute, and then we do the closing remarks.
I'd like to say that it's important that we acknowledge the efforts of the international community, but we need to localize some of these policies and laws. But localizing them means individual country champions to localize some of these laws and regulations. Because again, as I said, I'll speak on behalf of Kenya, because the Mining Act is gender skewed. And it's because when the people were sitting down to draft that, locally, they decided that this is the kind of act that Kenya needs. Therefore, it was drafted with a gender lens. Therefore, we need the right people like us who are actually trained in the sector to step up and say, we will advocate for gender within our country, and hopefully we'll be able to increase the numbers of women along the oil, gas, and mining value chain. Thank you, Angela.
All right, thank you very much, Alaka. Thank you very much, Kennedy. And thank you very much, our viewers. So the video has been recorded. It's live on YouTube. You can always share it with your colleagues, friends who haven't been able to join us today during this Zoom webinar. And also, I must note that we shall be sharing with you the chapter on gender, technology, and extractives. So look out for that once the book is published, because it's going into the production process soon. And feel free to contact Alaka and Kennedy if you have more questions with respect to gender, technology, and if you have general questions with respect to energy and extractives, feel free to reach out to them and feel free to ask them more about their chapter and also to ask them any questions you think they can address. Thank you very much, our viewers. Stay tuned. The next webinar will be on the 8th. It will be an energy debate. So stay tuned and please do join us. All right, this marks the end of our webinar. Thank you very much, guys. And do not forget to share the YouTube link with all your contacts on social media so that they can also be able to benefit from this discussion. All right, bye-bye, and do take care.
Bye. Thank you very much.